A cocky local rock band challenged David Gilmour to a guitar battle outside a London pub, thinking they were about to humiliate some old guy with long hair. They had no idea that Jimmy Page was sitting in the corner booth, quietly watching everything unfold with growing amusement. It was a typical drizzly Thursday evening in Camden, October 2019, and the Dublin Castle pub was buzzing with its usual crowd of music lovers, local musicians, and industry insiders. The venue had been a cornerstone of London's rock scene for decades, hosting everyone from Madness to Blur in their early days. But tonight was supposed to be just another quiet evening of local bands showcasing their talent to whoever would listen. David Gilmour had slipped into the pub unnoticed around 8 p.m., wearing a simple black jacket, worn jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his distinctive curly gray hair. At 73, he looked like any other aging rocker who might frequent Camden's legendary music venues. He ordered a pint of bitter and found a small table near the back, hoping to enjoy the music anonymously while catching up with an old friend who ran sound at the venue. The evening's lineup consisted of 3 local bands, each eager to make their mark on London's competitive music scene. The final act, a 4-piece called Electric Storm, had been making waves in Camden's underground circuit with their aggressive style and brash confidence. They were young, talented, and absolutely convinced that modern rock had surpassed anything the previous generations had ever accomplished. Jake Morrison, Electric Storm's 24-year-old lead guitarist, was particularly vocal about his disdain for dinosaur rock. He had spent the entire evening between sets loudly proclaiming that bands like Pink Floyd were overhyped studio creations who couldn't cut it in today's music scene. His bandmates, drummer Kyle Chen, bassist Amanda Rodriguez, and rhythm guitarist Tom Bradley, fed off his energy and arrogance. "I'm telling you," Jake announced to anyone within earshot, "half these classic rock heroes would get destroyed by any decent guitarist playing the Camden circuit today. They just got famous because there was less competition back then." As Electric Storm took the stage for their set, they launched into an aggressive, technically proficient performance that showcased Jake's undeniable skill. His solos were fast, precise, and filled with modern techniques that would have been impossible with 1970s equipment. The crowd responded enthusiastically, and Jake's confidence grew with each song. What neither Jake nor his bandmates noticed was the man in the corner booth who had been watching their performance with keen interest. Jimmy Page, wearing a dark hoodie and nursing a whiskey, had arrived about halfway through their set. At 75, the Led Zeppelin guitarist was still an imposing figure, but like Gilmour, he preferred to observe the London music scene from the shadows these days. Page had immediately spotted Gilmour across the room and nodded in acknowledgement. But both legends remained at their respective tables, content to enjoy the show without causing a disturbance. They had learned long ago that their mere presence could transform any casual evening into chaos. As Electric Storm finished their set to enthusiastic applause, Jake's adrenaline was pumping. The crowd's response had validated everything he believed about his generation's superiority over the past. As the band began packing up their equipment, Jake noticed the long-haired man in the baseball cap who had been sitting quietly in the back. "Hey," Jake called out, his voice still amplified by the confidence of a successful performance. "You've been sitting there all night. Are you a musician or just another wannabe hanging around hoping for inspiration?" David Gilmour looked up from his pint, surprised to be addressed. "I play a bit," he replied modestly, his famous voice soft and unassuming. Jake's bandmates gathered around, sensing entertainment. The pub's crowd, which had been slowly dispersing, began to take notice of the confrontation developing near the stage. "Yeah? What kind of music?" Jake pressed, his tone condescending. "Let me guess. You're probably one of those guys who thinks Pink Floyd was the greatest band ever because they had some fancy light shows and long, boring songs." Gilmour smiled gently. "I have a lot of respect for Pink Floyd's music," he said diplomatically. This response triggered exactly the reaction Jake was hoping for. "Right, another classic rock worshiper," he laughed, looking around for support from his friends and the remaining crowd. "Here's the thing, mate. Those guys were products of their time. They wouldn't last 5 minutes in today's music scene. The technical standards are so much higher now." Kyle Chen, the drummer, jumped in. "Jake's right. I mean, no offense to your heroes, but guys like David Gilmour are so overrated. His solos are just slow, predictable emotional wankery. Anyone can play that stuff. The irony of the moment was lost on everyone except the two observers in the corner booths. Jimmy Page nearly choked on his whiskey, while David Gilmour maintained his composed expression, though a slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Tell you what," Jake announced, his voice rising as he sensed an opportunity to demonstrate his point in front of an audience. "I'll prove it to you. Pick any Pink Floyd song, any song at all, and I'll show you how it should really be played. Then maybe you can understand why modern guitarists have moved beyond that outdated style." The pub had fallen silent. About 30 people were now watching this unexpected confrontation between the cocky young guitarist and the quiet older man who seemed remarkably calm in the face of such aggressive challenge. Amanda Rodriguez, the bassist, added fuel to the fire. "Come on, it'll be educational. Jake can show you what those songs sound like when played by someone with real technical skill." Gilmour set down his pint and looked thoughtfully at the young musicians. "That's quite an offer," he said quietly. "But wouldn't it be more fair if we both played? You know, a proper comparison?" Jake's eyes lit up with predatory excitement. This was even better than he had hoped. "You want to challenge me? Seriously?" He looked around at his bandmates and laughed. "Guys, this old-timer thinks he can hang with a real guitarist. This is going to be hilarious." Tom Bradley, the rhythm guitarist, was already unplugging his instrument. "Here, use mine," he offered to Gilmour. "It's a 2019 Fender Stratocaster, probably more advanced than anything you're used to." The crowd pressed closer as word spread through the pub that some kind of guitar battle was about to take place. Phones appeared as people began recording what they expected to be an amusing mismatch between youthful skill and aging delusion. "What song do you want to embarrass yourself with?" Jake asked, already tuning his guitar with theatrical precision. Gilmour accepted the borrowed Stratocaster and spent a moment adjusting the strap and checking the tuning. "How about Comfortably Numb," he suggested, "since you mentioned David Gilmour specifically." "Perfect choice," Jake grinned. "That's one of his most famous solos, and also one of his most overrated. I'll show you how it's supposed to sound when played with actual technique and passion." Jake positioned himself center stage and launched into his interpretation of the Comfortably Numb solo. His version was technically flawless, faster than the original, filled with additional flourishes, and demonstrating impressive finger dexterity. The crowd watched appreciatively as he blazed through scales and arpeggios, transforming Gilmour's melodic, emotional solo into a showcase of pure technical prowess. When he finished, Jake received enthusiastic applause from most of the audience. He took a bow and gestured toward Gilmour with exaggerated courtesy. "Your turn, grandfather. Try to keep up." David Gilmour stepped forward, still holding the borrowed Stratocaster. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering himself, then began to play. The difference was immediately apparent, though not in the way the young musicians expected. Where Jake had played with impressive speed and technical skill, Gilmour played with something far more powerful: soul. Each note seemed to carry emotional weight, building a sonic architecture that transformed the pub's atmosphere. As the solo progressed, the crowd fell completely silent. This wasn't just guitar playing, it was storytelling through music. Every bend, every sustain, every carefully chosen note served a purpose beyond mere technical demonstration. The familiar melody emerged not as a reproduction, but as a living, breathing entity that seemed to speak directly to each listener's heart. But something else was happening in the pub that night. People in the crowd were beginning to recognize something familiar about the man on stage. The way he held the guitar, the distinctive phrasing of his solos, the effortless way he coaxed emotion from every note. It was all starting to click. "Holy shit," whispered a woman near the front. "That's actually David Gilmour." The realization spread through the crowd like wildfire. Phones that had been recording in amusement were now capturing in awe. The casual evening at a Camden pub had suddenly become a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Jake Morrison's confidence began to crumble as he watched the crowd's reaction. This wasn't just good guitar playing, this was transcendent. As Gilmour built toward the solo's climax, Jake realized with growing horror that he wasn't watching some random old guy trying to play Pink Floyd. He was watching David Gilmour himself, playing his own composition with the kind of mastery that had made him a legend. When the solo reached its soaring conclusion, the pub erupted in the kind of applause usually reserved for concert halls. But before the cheering could fully develop, another figure emerged from the corner booth. Jimmy Page walked slowly toward the stage, his presence causing another wave of recognition to ripple through the crowd. The sight of two of rock's greatest guitarists in the same small Camden pub was beyond surreal. It was the stuff of music legend. Page approached Gilmour with a knowing smile. "Beautiful as always, David," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly hushed venue. "Though I have to say, the warm-up act was quite entertaining." The crowd burst into laughter and renewed applause, while Jake Morrison stood frozen in mortification. The reality of what had just transpired was settling in. He had challenged one of the greatest guitarists in rock history to prove his own skills, and he had done so in front of Jimmy Page. Gilmour, ever gracious, approached the stunned young musician. "Jake, isn't it?" he said kindly. "You're a very talented guitarist. Seriously, your technical skills are impressive, and with time and experience, you'll develop your own voice." I had no idea," Jake stammered, his face burning with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Gilmour. I feel like a complete idiot." "Don't," Gilmour replied firmly. "Confidence is important for a musician, and questioning the past, pushing boundaries, that's how music evolves. You just learned that technique and soul aren't mutually exclusive. The best guitarists combine both." Jimmy Page nodded in agreement. "When I was your age, I thought I knew everything too," he added with a chuckle. "The music industry has a way of humbling all of us eventually. The trick is to learn from moments like this instead of being destroyed by them." What happened next was completely unexpected. Instead of leaving after their impromptu lesson in humility, Jake and his bandmates found themselves invited into an informal jam session with two of their musical heroes. For the next hour, the small Camden pub became the stage for one of the most extraordinary musical collaborations in rock history. Gilmour and Page, joined by Electric Storm and several other musicians in the crowd, created music that blended generational styles and approaches. Jake Morrison discovered that playing alongside masters didn't diminish his own abilities, it elevated them. Under the guidance of Gilmour and Page, he began to understand how technical proficiency could serve emotional expression rather than replace it. The evening's impromptu session was captured on dozens of phones and quickly went viral on social media. But more than just internet fame, the night became a transformative experience for everyone involved. Electric Storm returned to the Camden music scene with a new approach to their craft. They incorporated the lessons learned from their encounter with David Gilmour, focusing on songwriting and emotional connection rather than just technical showmanship. Their subsequent recordings showed a maturity and depth that quickly caught the attention of major record labels. Jake Morrison, in particular, was changed by the experience. He began studying the work of classic rock guitarists, not to criticize them, but to understand how they had achieved such lasting impact. His playing evolved from impressive technical display to genuine musical communication. The story of the night became legendary in London's music circles. The Dublin Castle pub installed a plaque commemorating the evening, and it became a pilgrimage site for guitarists from around the world. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the friendship that developed between the generations. Gilmour became a mentor to Jake, offering guidance and encouragement as the young musician developed his craft. Page occasionally joined their informal sessions, creating a musical lineage that bridged decades of rock history. In interviews years later, Jake Morrison would reflect on that night as the moment his real musical education began. "I thought I was challenging some old guy who was living in the past," he said. "Instead, I learned that the best music is timeless and that true masters never stop teaching, even to cocky kids who think they know better." David Gilmour's response to the evening was characteristically modest. Music isn't about proving who's better, it's about connection between musicians, between performers and audiences, between generations. That night in Camden reminded me why I fell in love with guitar in the first place. The encounter also demonstrated something profound about the nature of artistic legacy. Rather than feeling threatened by younger musicians or dismissing their innovations, the masters embraced the opportunity to share knowledge and learn from fresh perspectives. The viral videos from that night have been viewed millions of times, but they represent more than just entertainment. They capture a moment when music transcended ego and competition to become something transformative for everyone involved. Today, when young musicians gather in Camden pubs to showcase their talents, they often tell the story of the night when David Gilmour and Jimmy Page appeared to remind everyone that greatness isn't about age or era. It's about the depth of connection between artist and art. The Dublin Castle still hosts regular open mic nights, and occasionally legendary musicians still slip in unnoticed to listen to the next generation. The tradition continues, fostered by the understanding that music's greatest power lies not in individual virtuosity, but in the magical moments when different generations unite in pursuit of something beautiful and true. If this story of humility, mentorship, and the timeless power of music inspired you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with any musicians you know, young or old. They'll understand how powerful it can be when legends and newcomers come together in the spirit of musical growth. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your perspective on your own abilities? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about unexpected encounters that prove greatness can be found in the most ordinary places.